Biopatrika, your very own online science communication platform, brings science closer to you in so many ways. We commit to connect our audience with scientists all across the globe, communicating their journey and remarkable experiences. Science is all about discovering new things and adding knowledge to the existing one.
But it's equally important to share your findings with people, right?
Well, it requires great skill to effectively communicate your research to the academic diaspora as well as to the common man.
Hence today, Scikonnect by Biopatrika brings all science enthusiasts out there to our podcast featuring what happens inside academia and effective ways of science communication. I, Pragya Gupta, my co-host Jaya Kumari, and a fantabulous intern, Parvathy Venkateshwaran, have been given the opportunity to speak to Professor Mohit Kumar Jolly to give us a sneak peek into his academic journey and his thoughts on science communication.
Dr. Mohit Kumar Jolly is notably a big name in the field of systems biology. He completed his bachelor's and master's from Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, and PhD in bioengineering at Rice University, where he was investigating the prospects of hybrid epithelial mesenchymal phenotypes in cancer metastasis. Spearheaded in research, he then worked as a Gulf Coast Consortia postdoctoral fellow jointly at Rice University and UTMB Anderson Cancer Center, developing computational models investigating the tumor microenvironment. At present, he is deputed as an assistant professor at Indian Institute of Science.
Besides thinking about systems biology approaches to decode cancer metastasis and therapy resistance, he is also very passionate about effective science communication and outreach programs. This has driven him forward to actively pursue his interests by being an integral part of the Society on Policy Center at IISc.
Thank you, Jay and Parvati, for introducing our guest. But we want to hear from Jolly himself a little bit about his background. Mohit, would you like to share something about yourself? Probably things that we missed out?
Thanks so much, Pragya, Jaya, Parvati, and the entire Biopatrika team for this fantastic opportunity to share some of my experiences. Yes, and Biopatrika, I think, is a fantastic initiative which has been spearheading various of these important aspects, such as interviewing students who are behind the research papers. Many times, PIs and advisors, of course, get the credit, but people doing the work are the students. I think that's a very good initiative. In terms of my background, I got interested in integrating different fields, mathematics and biology at IIT Kanpur during my days there. Through courses and interacting with faculty members in physics and maths departments who were looking at different biological systems, and that got me motivated to look into certain diseases from this perspective. Was fortunate to have courses and expertise on campus around these different disciplines and various mentors along the way who were kind enough to help me see how to connect the dots between these aspects, and which is what I try to do currently in my role here at ISC. So our lab has various undergraduate students, graduate students, and postdoctoral fellows coming from very different disciplines, from electrical engineering, physics, mathematics, bioinformatics, cancer biology. And they all brainstorm ideas with one another to get a better understanding of how cancer cells metastasize and how they develop resistance against drugs. Now, as a part of this process, being able to communicate one's ideas very clearly to people coming from a very different background is essential. And that has been my focus of science communication in more recent past maybe 5 years or so, where I've been trying to train graduate students, postdoctoral fellows, or undergraduate students, anyone involved in scientific research, to step out of their comfort zone and try to talk about their work in a language, in terms that are still scientific in nature, The concepts, we are still trying to communicate the same concepts, but and to an intelligent audience, but that audience does not speak the same language. So if you would write a code in Python and use the compiler of R to run it, it won't. And similarly is the concept about languages or vocabulary of different disciplines. So if I utter the word differentiation, it means very different things to a cell biologist and a mathematician. So when a cell biologist says the word differentiation, and a mathematician creates a very different image of that word. So what I've been trying to emphasize to my students and others around is that it's the responsibility of the so-called sender in the communication process to make sure that the so-called listener gets as accurate information, as close a mental image of the word being uttered as that of the sender itself. And the so-called sender, and I'll come to why I'm using the word so-called, because communication is actually not a one-way street. So these roles keep switching. But nonetheless, the so-called sender should begin to take on the responsibility that whether communication happened effectively or it did not. We often easily put the responsibility on the listener for various reasons and shrug off our own responsibilities, which I think is not a very effective way of continuing any dialogue in a productive manner.
That's a very good point, Mohit. I mean, it's really important to, when you're communicating your work, then it should be in such terms that all kinds of audience are able to understand. And absolutely, you have been associated with science communication and motivate your students to like if effectively communicate their work. That's commendable. And so coming back to the science communication part, what is your preferred way to communicate science?
So that's a very good question, and I would say it completely depends on the audience and purpose. So once someone has identified who one wants to talk to and why one wants to talk to, then I think that automatically then you can draw a list of which is the most efficient way of communication and then proceed accordingly. So when I'm talking to, say, undergraduate students who are just getting started in research, usually we meet person in person now that the pandemic is allowing us to, and just jot about ideas. So if they're coming from physics background, I would try to draw parallels from what they might have learned. If they're coming from chemistry background, I will tell the same concept, drawing parallels with what they might have learned in chemistry, and similarly about mathematics. And yes, seeing the glow in their eyes is what is the signal to the so-called sender, in this case me, from the so-called receiver, that yes, there is some excitement which is being generated. And as long as that glow is there, I can sort of continue.
Thank you, Mohit. And Mohit, so everybody needs to communicate, especially a researcher when it comes to talking about your science. But do you also see like science communication coming up as a full-time job or career in the coming years?
That's a very pertinent question. I was looking for a career in science communication 10 years ago. And I mean, I'm sure things have improved now in the past decade. There are various science communication portfolios, Biopatrika being clearly one of the leading ones. There are other entities which have come up, which talk about other aspects of social aspects of doing science. This can be about inclusivity, this can be about diversity. So these aspects are at least now being discussed. There is more emphasis on science communication in regional languages as well. So I do see that we will have, we also see many science graphical artists now, or people with advanced training in science and with a flair of art and communicating their ideas in that effective manner. So yes, I do see that this can be a full-fledged job for um, some people. Again, I'm not sure how large this market is supposed to be, because again, this will in some ways depend on the size of the scientific community itself, and also the number of people we are producing as advanced science degree holders who may not necessarily want to pursue a scientific research career for various different options, for various different reasons. So,
Yeah, I'm sure, Mohit, that even if you did not take up a science communication career, you are great at communicating science and you will be a mentor to us and all future, whoever wants to take it in the future.
I'll be happy to help in whichever way I can.
So Mohit, as you said, like a lot of different fields are coming together, like graphic designers and physicists and chemists and biologists all working together. So it is like kind of very growing area, like science communication. I see it as a very new avenue, and it still has to go a very long way. But last year, I think we all had experienced the effects and repercussions of the COVID-19 pandemic. And people said that it has been difficult to communicate among scientists. So, what do you feel on that? I mean, it's always a gray area, and not everything is true about that, that it was very difficult to actually communicate. What is your thought?
Um, so with the pandemic, well, I mean, at least conceptually speaking, one of the difficult concepts to communicate is that of probability or likelihood, right? If you get a vaccine, you are X% less likely to have a severe disease, and that X is not 100, X is close to 90 or whatever that efficacy is. And that concept I particularly found hard to explain to people. Um, and that I think has been a major reason why we have seen people who have been hesitating to take vaccines. So what I was able to do at an individual level is, for instance, if I would come across such individuals, I would first listen to them why they do not want to take vaccines, for instance, or why they do not want to wear masks. Um, and once I know where they're coming from, what their perspective is, then it becomes a little bit easier to tackle it, because otherwise, you know, we, many of us get in this mode of what in the field of science communication research is called a deficit model, that the scientists have the information, have the knowledge, have the wisdom, whatever, and the non-scientists or public is an empty vessel waiting to be filled, which is clearly not the case. So so again, once, for instance, someone was talking to me about why this individual did not want to take vaccine, and I understood those reasons. And some of them were related to, oh, maybe there is not enough care being taken in production of vaccines. There's not enough standardization being followed, or whatever information that they were getting from WhatsApp or wherever other. And I offered to connect them to people at Serum Institute of India, for instance, and say, we'll arrange a visit for you. You go there, you see how things are happening. And then if you still don't want to take it, that's fine, but at least give it a shot. So again, sort of, if you begin to narrow down why they are resisting a particular aspect, and then offer pointed advice, um, it at least becomes clearer whether this individual is, likely to have a logical discussion with you and arrive at whatever conclusion, or you would realize at some point that there's no not much point, beating your head against the wall.
Yeah,
And
like
then
a lot of people come with their own reservations and they have their own reasons that why they don't want to follow the scientific guidelines, and it becomes really difficult sometimes to break through their reservations and beliefs. And effective science communication can really play a very important role in this aspect.
right, very true.
So, Mohit, you've been speaking a lot about the importance of social media and understanding the people's mindset and why they prefer to do certain things and why they don't is very much essential in communicating the science that we want to, right? And nowadays, especially after the pandemic, to put it, we are very much connected. The world is very much connected, and we get news every day, and it can be fake, it can be true. And social media is playing a major role in people's mindset and their decisions. So, what, according to you, would be the best way to communicate science, and what would be the role of social media in it specifically?
So, as they say, right, WhatsApp can be beaten only with WhatsApp. So, if you have some news flowing around for, and that might have gotten distorted when it goes from interlocutor one to interlocutor two for purely unintentional purposes as well. Even if that's the utopian scenario, um, one way we can do this is sort of create similar WhatsApp forwards, um, and so that when it reaches the same or similar set of audience who are being exposed to this. Because if one is getting information from WhatsApp, and I'm just using this as an example, wherever this is coming from, and on the other hand, we are doing Twitter, which may not even, I mean, the audience may not even overlap. So then all that effort is towards less eventual outcome. So again, as I would say, one needs to understand where one's audience is, what one's audience is likely to use as a social media platform, and there can be more than one, of course. And then if you're trying to tackle a particular pseudoscience or non-scientific aspect, then try to sort of lineage trace where that is coming from. And again, find a solution there, which is likely to be more effective because you're going to capture the same audience.
So Mohit, like there have been truly lot of misinformations floating around in the air these days, and we can't control people from spreading like fake news and everything. We ourselves get a lot of WhatsApp forwards which make no sense at all, and we have to explain. I mean, our first contact is our family, and being as a researcher, it's our responsibility to correct the misinformation. And talking about, like, you're also involved in science communication, and you're yourself a supervisor, you're guiding your students and you're collaborating with other people, and so there's a lot of multitasking that goes on. So how do you manage all of these?
So, I mean, whatever one is passionate about, one finds time. That's all I would say. I'm passionate about mentoring students. I'm passionate about bringing disciplines together, which were somehow, I mean, so when nature operates, they don't, the natural systems do not set boundaries that no, you're a physical system, you're a chemical system, you're a biological system. These boundaries were set by our education system in school, because there is somewhere you'll have to begin, right? So there's no fault of theirs. That's how you sort of pick up the building blocks.
That's so true. I mean, inculcating information from different fields has become so important and need of the hour these days, that it can't be like that a biologist is working on something and that's it. The other aspects also come and play a role. And so what is your approach when you are talking to different, like, people from different backgrounds and different fields, like if you are writing a grant or meeting some industry people, so what is your approach of communicating with them?
So I'll give you an anecdote. I had a PhD student who joined me last year, and he's an electrical engineer. He did not study biology after class 10th. And he asked me this question. question that, what do you think an electrical engineer can contribute at all to understanding of biology? And I told him, give me 1 year, give me 6 months. Let's chat about different things. Let's talk about what you have learned and how some of those ideas can be applied to what we are doing here.
Mhm.
Um, and then if you don't like it, you're of course free to divulge into other aspects, and I will help you move to so-called sort of pure electrical engineering. And 1 year later, he speaks better biology than most other people in the lab who come from a biology background. So I think, again, when we are talking about communication, so here, sort of, I tried to understand where this individual is coming from. So the thought process was that, I'm an electrical engineer. I may not be able to do anything useful here, but I can do something useful somewhere else. So why am I wasting my time? Once you sort of bring up the confidence to say that, no, first of all, this is a short-term arrangement. Second of all, you will be helped to go to wherever you want to go next. So that sort of allays one's fears. Now, you can call it mentoring, you can call it communication, whichever way. But I always try to understand where that individual is coming from, what that individual is looking for, and then try to tailor my own communication strategy accordingly in real time. And at least this one has worked so far, and he seems to be happy, enjoying contributing to biological systems.
Yeah, Mohit, so similar is like your situation. You started with IIT JEE, the engineering kind of background, and then you took up biological sciences and bioengineering. So, is it like you always knew you wanted to have a lab, wanted to go into research, or was it some moment at IIT Kanpur that you made this decision and this transition? Can you share that with us?
Sure. Um, no, I was not sure at all that I would want to be a scientist, have a lab. In fact, as I told you, I was looking for a career in science communication, in science journalism. During IIT Kanpur days, I started the campus science magazine there, Nerd, which the goal was that students can write about whatever research they are doing and potentially excite others, because there was no such platform for people interested in scientific and technical fields to share their enthusiasm. Um, so one event that comes to mind is I was battling around. Yes, I know decent maths, I know past grade level biology, and how do I connect them both? I was in Dr. Sinha's lab and just searching random scientific papers, mathematical modeling, and a term that the lab people work on, which in this case was planar cell polarity. And there was a Science 2005 paper which had developed a detailed mathematical model towards this. And that, I say, was at least a major moment. It said, okay, so there are people doing this, and this is being published in the most respected journals, so which means there is some usefulness to it. If I remember correctly, mathematical modeling was in the title of that paper, which means that that particular tool was important enough for that individual study that it was highlighted. So yeah, then I would say that I sort of started feeling a little bit more comfortable after that. And Professor Sinha gave me complete freedom to work on whatever I wanted to. And then I found various other papers in this area. Some were by physicists who were thinking of cell polarity as magnets. Some were not caring about individual molecules, for instance. Some were more from systems biologists. So, and I had excellent support from other faculty members in physics and maths departments who always motivated me and encouraged me to learn whatever tool that they were aware of and to apply to whatever biological system that I get interested in. And then around 2012, when I had secured the PhD position, I read two books that summer. One of them was The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and the other one was Emperor of All Maladies by Siddharth Mukherjee, which is a beautiful biography about cancer. And that motivated me to work on cancer. And I joined my PhD advisor and co-advisor, both of them theoretical physicists who had not extensively worked on cancer before, were very interested in moving into that area. And again, gave me full freedom to dissect, to go forward. And so, yeah, I would say it has been the most important thing has been the support from mentors and advisors, support and freedom from both of them, from all of them, uh, at different stages, which keeps me going even today. And I try to portray that role to my students uh, in some form.
Sounds really interesting, Mohit, and especially with respect to you, the diversified science that you bring together, like be it computation or mathematics or biology or electrical engineering, as you've been speaking, it is really fascinating to hear. It's so admiring because all of us, as you have said, we set boundaries to ourselves. Okay, this is physics, this is equations, I'll not deal with it. But nature does not work like that, as you have mentioned, and everyone learns from his or her own experiences, and we are sure that you have crossed a lot of milestones, and you have been recently cited as the top 2 percentage researchers by the uh, Elsevier and the Stanford University's latest release as well. So we congratulate you on that, and we would like to hear from you about how it was very proud to you, or your experience on that, or your what you learned from that, or what is your take on that particular uh, recent achievement of yours.
Thank you for your best wishes. It's very humbling to know that this recognition came, and I would give all credits to the entire team of collaborators and students who have been very very fortunate to work with. And so when I talk to students and we have these discussions that what should I call myself? So physics student would ask me, can I call myself a biophysicist? And a biologist would ask me, can I also call myself a biophysicist or a physical biologist or systems biologist or computational biologist, whatever. And I ask them back, uh, you can if you call yourself X instead of Y, will that change the work that you're doing? Will that change your interest? No, right? So these again, we are getting in the game of putting a label, um, because when one talks about interdisciplinary research and the future of it. So now we are creating newer labels. Instead of physicists and biologists, now we are biophysicists, physical biologists, whatever. So then I tell them, look, identity crisis is your identity. Don't don't try to force fit an identity to yourself. Um, just go ahead with whatever interests you, and that will take you places. So I have been fortunate to be surrounded by such people who, despite this identity crisis, find things enjoyable and worth pursuing. And this recent recognition is all credits to such wonderful flock of people around.
That's so humbly spoken, Mohit. We are all very inspired by your words. And any last tips on science communication, how to effectively communicate to a varied people?
So I would maybe end with what I said initially, and again sharing an anecdote. So I did a short survey of faculty members at some point, asking them what activities in their daily life do they think constitute as communication. And interestingly, most of the answers, especially from faculty members in natural science and engineering departments, um, came to the kind of activities such as writing papers, teaching classes, giving seminars, etc. What was missing was, in most cases, was reading and listening. If you pick up any of the English language tests, any language tests, standardized ones, they have all the four components: because communication is a two-way street. And when we say that, when we are speaking, when we are writing, those are the only modes of communication, we are by default ignoring our role as a listener. And again, getting in the deficit mode of communication, where one does not care about getting a feedback from the so-called listener, whether the message was properly received or not, whether the message had the desired impact or not. So as long as we are sensitized towards this and we spend enough time gaining that feedback and adjusting our communication strategy accordingly, we will improve with time. There's no perfect communication ever. One can only improve with time, and that improvement
Do you think, Mohit, like it comes from practice? Like we are also part of science communication society right now. So, and every kind of science communication methods require different set of skills. So,
Right.
what do you feel that how a person recognizes that, okay, this particular kind of science communication method is suitable for me?
I mean, that I think is an individual's choice as to whatever one feels most comfortable doing or most comfortable learning and excelling at. So, for instance, I have not divulged into video making because I know that's not my strength, at least currently. Um, so, I think identifying one's strengths in these technical tools, and because many times the tools and audience sort of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So once you finalize your audience, then that restricts your tools. And once you finalize your tools, you restrict your audience. So there is, I mean, these are not completely independent parameters. So with better clarity on one or both of them, one can proceed forward.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and the magical formula of science communication. We're very thrilled to have you on this podcast. Thank you so much, Mohit, for joining us.
Thank you. It was wonderful discussion. Thank you so much once again. All the best with all your initiatives.
Yeah, I'm sure our audience will be as amazed as we are. Thank you so much for giving us this wondrous opportunity. And since this is a recorded event, we are sure our listeners will have questions. May they contact you by any means?
Please, by email, by Twitter, whatever is most convenient to people.
Thank you so much.
That we'll have Professor Jolly's email address and social media handles for the podcast for all our listeners. So please do share your feedback at biopatrika.in@gmail.com. Now we'll take your leave and hope to see you again with our next podcast. And thank you all. Thank you so much, Mohit, for this podcast.